Subscribe to take your place in this universe full of science fiction and horror stories, and go after the unknown, because some truths are hidden in the dark. It sat beneath his conscious thoughts, waiting like a door he was afraid to open. A hiss broke the silence. Not sharp, but steady, controlled. Ethan forced his body upright, his muscles aching from confinement. The air changed, sterile, crisp, but layered with something almost electric. A presence. Light bled into the room, thin at first, then widening as the door slid open. He squinted, his eyes rebelling against the sudden contrast. But even through the glare, he saw the figure standing in the doorway. A Zeltron. It moved with a precise stillness, as if every motion had been measured before it was executed. The obsidian exoskeleton shimmered under the dim, artificial glow, each segmented plate shifting subtly as the creature stepped forward. Those golden eyes, if they could even be called eyes, settled on him, unreadable, unblinking. Ethan tensed as the alien reached out, expecting another wave of searing pain. It had seeped into Ethan's very core, settling in his bones, hollowing him out from the inside. He could no longer tell if he was shivering from the temperature or the exhaustion pressing down on him like an invisible weight. The darkness remained absolute, but now he knew it was more than just the absence of light. It was deliberate, a calculated deprivation. He had lost track of time. Had been hours? A full day? His mind drifted in and out of wakefulness, his thoughts tangled between reality and restless visions. And yet, somewhere beneath the fog of disorientation, he felt a shift. Something in him had changed. The moment the alien had reached out, pressing an invisible force into his skull, he had felt his mind split open like a raw nerve. The pain had been unbearable, but what disturbed him more was what came after, the lingering imprint of something foreign. It was still there. Not words, not images, but knowledge. The walls were impossibly smooth, the same dark alloy as the ship's exterior, broken only by thin veins of glowing energy that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. The floor beneath his bare feet was cool, firm, yet strangely frictionless. The air was thinner than he was used to, but held an artificial crispness, sterilized and controlled. Ethan barely had time to take it in before movement caught his eye. A group of captives was being led down a parallel corridor. Their wrists were bound like his, their expressions vacant, some dazed, others empty. He searched their faces, looking for any sign of recognition, but they were strangers. A few moved with robotic obedience, their strides in sync as if they had been programmed into submission. Others struggled, their bodies twitching, resisting something unseen. Then Ethan saw what happened to those who resisted. A man, older than Ethan, staggered against his captor, his body jerking violently as if his muscles were betraying him. He tried to move, but his body refused. Not restrained, not paralyzed, simply held in place by something deeper than muscle or bone. The throne wasn't forcing him to stay. It was waiting. The golden-veined stranger was shouting his name, but their voice sounded distant, muffled by the growing pressure in his skull. Their hand clamped onto his arm, trying to pull him away, but the moment they touched him, they staggered. A sharp gasp tore from their lips as they stumbled back, their golden veins flaring before dimming into a dull glow. Their breathing was ragged, their pupils blown wide in shock. They had felt it too. The figure who had led them here stood motionless, observing with quiet expectation. Now you begin to understand. Ethan forced his jaw to unclench. His voice came out strained. Understand what? The figure took a single step closer. That this is not the first time you have been here. The words struck him like a blow to the chest. He moved before the Zeltron could react, twisting free, his now unbound hands seizing the alien's arm, shoving it off balance. He ran. Alarms howled through the corridor, the once sterile walls now flashing with streaks of red warning lights. Behind him, footsteps thundered, voices barking commands in a language he still couldn't understand. Except, somehow, he almost could. Something in his mind had changed. Something was waking up, but there was no time to question it. Not yet. He just had to keep running. The ship was changing. Ethan could feel it beneath his feet, in the air, in the pulsing energy thrumming through its walls. It was no longer just an alien vessel. It was something sentient, something aware. It had been watching, adapting, and now it was reacting. His legs burned as he ran, the golden-veined stranger keeping pace beside him. The corridor stretched endlessly ahead, its walls shifting in ways that weren't natural. It continues because you still believe it must. Ethan clenched his fists. Then I'll end it. The city reacted. The structures around them shuddered, the golden veins flickering like a failing pulse. The air thickened, resisting, not out of malice, not out of anger, out of fear. It had never been the city trapping him. It had been himself. He had never known what lay beyond this moment, beyond this decision, because he had never allowed himself to see it. Every past version of him had chosen the throne in some way, chosen to become part of it, to try to wield it, to destroy it, but never to step away. Ethan inhaled sharply. Then he stood. The throne did not hold him back. For the first time, it let him go. The golden-veined stranger staggered, as if the world had tilted beneath them. The city groaned, its very foundation shifting, something unraveling at its core. You were never supposed to stay, the figure said. Their voice was steady, carrying an authority that didn't need to be raised to be heard. You were late. Ethan blinked. Of all the things he had expected, that had not been one of them. The stranger stiffened beside him. Late for what? The figure didn't answer right away. Instead, they studied Ethan, their golden gaze trailing over him like they were reading something beyond the surface, beyond the physical. Then, finally, they said, "You were meant to arrive prepared." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Prepared for what? The figure tilted their head slightly. For the choice. The city pulsed again, a ripple of energy rolling outward like a heartbeat. The air thickened, pressing against Ethan's skin. Something was changing. The city was listening. The stranger's voice dropped into something near a whisper. I think we walked into something bigger than we thought. Ethan knew they were right. He just didn't know what yet. Each life, each choice, leading back to this moment. He saw himself walking through this city, the faces of people who were both strangers and familiar all at once. He saw different versions of this same moment, times when he had fought, times when he had fled, times when he had accepted. Every choice leading here, every path bringing him back. His grip tightened on the throne. Why don't I remember? The figure tilted their head. Because you always choose to forget. The words sent a sharp ripple of nausea through him. He forced himself to breathe, to ground himself in the present, but it was getting harder. The weight of who he had been, what he had done pressed against his mind like an oncoming wave. The golden-veined stranger was staring at him, horror creeping into their features. Ethan, get up. We're leaving. He wanted to. He needed to. But the throne wouldn't let go. Not yet. The figure's golden eyes flickered. The cycle is incomplete. You must decide. It blistered metal, scorched the pavement, and turned the atmosphere heavy with something unnatural. You should have run. Should have found shelter. But how did you hide from something that consumed the sky itself? The ships were monstrous, grotesque silhouettes against the burning firmament. They were not the sleek, aerodynamic crafts of science fiction fantasies. There was no elegance in their design, no unnecessary ornamentation. They were built for conquest. Massive, asymmetrical, plated in dark alloys that drank the light rather than reflected it. No insignias, no markings of origin. There was no need. Their mere presence declared the truth. We own you now. Then came the beams. Thin columns of energy, white-hot and merciless, lanced down from the underbellies of the ships, slicing through steel and concrete with surgical precision. Entire buildings, once monuments of human ingenuity, disintegrated as though they had never existed. The people were next. No screams, no time. Wanted to do something, but what could one unarmed man do against an empire that had torn the sky apart? He forced himself to breathe, forced himself to swallow the helpless rage burning in his throat. Survive first. The time for fighting would come later. A sharp pressure against the back of his skull sent his breath hitching in his throat. Cold metal. A weapon. Stand. The voice was neither harsh nor cruel, just indifferent. He exhaled slowly, raising his hands as he turned to face his captor. The Zeltran soldier regarded him with those unreadable, burning eyes, its head tilting slightly as though studying an insect pinned beneath its boot. "You will adapt," it said, as though speaking an undeniable truth. Then, with one swift movement, it wrenched his arms behind his back, locking his wrists in unyielding metal restraints. Ethan didn't resist. Not yet. The world turned to darkness. The cold was no longer just an external force, but instead the Zeltran grasped his arm, hauling him effortlessly to his feet. His legs buckled from stiffness, and he might have collapsed if not for the firm grip keeping him upright. "You are adjusting," the Zeltran said. The voice had that same layered distortion, as if multiple tones echoed beneath each word. Ethan swallowed hard, forcing himself to meet its gaze. To what? The alien tilted its head slightly, as if considering how much to tell him. Then, in the same detached tone, it said the transition. The word sent a chill through him. His mind raced. Was that what the others had gone through? Was that why some complied and others didn't? Before he could press for answers, the Zeltran released its grip and gestured toward the open doorway. A silent command. Ethan hesitated, weighing his options. There was no point in resisting. Not yet. He stepped forward. The corridor was vast, stretching endlessly in both directions. They descended further, their underbellies splitting open like the bellies of great mechanical beasts, disgorging their horrors onto the ravaged earth below. They were tall, unnervingly so, humanoid in shape but disturbingly elongated, their skeletal frames encased in segmented exoskeletons of obsidian metal. Their movements were eerily smooth, too precise, lacking the hesitations and imperfections of natural motion. And their eyes, if they could even be called that, burned with molten gold, deep-set and unfeeling, scanning the wreckage with an almost lazy indifference. Zeltrans. The name meant nothing to Ethan then, but soon it would define everything. He ducked into the shattered remains of a transit station, his back pressed against the fractured glass of a ticket booth. His lungs ached, his pulse pounded in his ears, but the sheer weight of the moment crushed any thought of moving. He had no weapon, no plan, just bodies reduced to shadows on the ground before being erased entirely. It was not war. War required resistance. This was extermination. Ethan ran. His legs burned, his breath came in ragged bursts, but he ran. Around him, the streets twisted into chaos. Vehicles abandoned mid-turn, the acrid scent of burning plastic filling his lungs. A woman ahead of him stumbled, her fingers scraping the pavement as she tried to rise. Instinct propelled him forward, hand outstretched to help. But before he could reach her, a shadow passed overhead. A fraction of a second later, she was gone. Nothing left but a charred imprint where she had been. He kept running. By the time the warships ceased their fire, the city was unrecognizable. Smoke writhed through the air in dense, toxic tendrils, carrying the unmistakable scent of scorched metal and flesh. The skyline had been reduced to skeletal remains, jagged and lifeless. And still, the ships loomed overhead. The sky burned. That was the first thing anyone noticed. The deep, endless black ruptured by streaks of silver fire, their brilliance searing through the clouds like the wrath of a vengeful god. The second thing was the silence. A city of millions, now breathless, held in eerie suspension, as if the entire world had drawn in a final, collective inhale. Then came a sound. It started as a low vibration, a deep hum that slithered through the bones, growing into a monstrous resonance. Glass trembled in its frames before bursting into crystalline shards. Car alarms shrieked only to be silenced a second later. The ground itself quivered under an unseen force. Then, with horrifying finality, the sky split open and the warships descended. Ethan staggered back, his shoulder hitting the crumbling brick wall behind him. The heat from the descending vessels warped the air, making the skyline ripple like a mirage. Just the sickening realization that whatever life had been before, it was over. Then came the voice. It crackled through the ruined streets, layered with distortion, thick and metallic. Surrender, and you will be spared. Lies. The ones who obeyed were rounded up, metallic cuffs snapping around their wrists before they were marched toward the waiting transport ships. The ones who resisted did not resist for long. A boy, no older than 16, suddenly broke from the line, his feet kicking up ash as he sprinted for freedom. One of the Zeltrons turned its head in his direction, as if considering, then raised an arm. A pulse of blue energy erupted from its palm. The boy didn't even make it 3 steps before his body seized midair, convulsing, then dropped to the ground in an unnatural heap. The line of captives kept moving. Ethan clenched his fists so tightly his nails cut into his palms. He wanted to help, wanted to fight. Ethan shouted, grabbing the stranger's arm and pulling them forward. They barely cleared the threshold before the passage sealed behind them, leaving only a seamless stretch of alloy where an open hall had been seconds before. The ship was hunting them. They stopped for a brief moment, both catching their breath. Ethan glanced at his companion. In the dim red glow, the golden veins along their arms pulsed faintly, mirroring the energy lines in the walls. He had no idea who they were, only that they had been in that stasis pod, altered but not yet broken, not yet fully integrated. You said you weren't one of them, Ethan said, voice low, but you were close. The stranger's gaze flickered toward him, wary but unafraid. I was in between. They exhaled, glancing down at their own hands as if seeing them for the first time. I don't know how long I was in there. The process, it changes you piece by piece. His mind screamed at him to fight, to run, to do something, but his body stayed frozen, caught in the gravitational pull of something he couldn't yet understand. The Zeltron led him forward, past the prisoners, deeper into the ship. They stopped in front of another door. It slid open without a sound, revealing a chamber unlike anything he had seen before. The walls pulsed faintly, alive with flowing streams of energy, coiling like veins. At the center of the room stood a chair. No, not a chair. A structure, a frame designed for something humanoid but not meant for comfort. Restraints extended from its arms and legs, their edges lined with the same dark alloy that pulsed through the walls. Ethan took an involuntary step back. You will adapt, the Zeltron said. This time, Ethan didn't let the fear take hold. He forced himself to breathe, to think. He had seen what happened to those who resisted and those who obeyed. He couldn't let himself become either. Beside him, the golden veined stranger twitched violently, resisting, but their body, too, became still. Footsteps approached, not the fast, purposeful stride of the soldiers they had evaded. This was slower, deliberate. A figure emerged from the far end of the corridor, stepping into the flickering red glow of the emergency lighting. Ethan recognized the exoskeleton before anything else. Sleek, segmented black plating, not merely armor, but something more. It moved with its wearer, not as protection, but as an extension of their very being. The golden veins embedded in the plating pulsed with quiet rhythm, mirroring the energy that ran through the walls. But the most unnerving thing wasn't the exoskeleton or even the molten gold of the creature's eyes. It was the way it smiled. A Zeltron, but not like the others. Ethan had seen soldiers, cold, efficient, precise in their movements. This was different. I should have been. Their voice trailed off, and when they looked at Ethan again, something unreadable passed behind their expression. You woke me up before it was finished. Ethan swallowed. What happens when it's finished? The stranger's jaw tensed. You stop being human. The words sat heavy between them, and neither needed to say what they both knew. The ship wasn't just taking prisoners. It was converting them. Before Ethan could respond, the ship shifted again. A distant hum grew into a low, vibrating pulse, reverberating through the walls, the floor, through Ethan's very bones. This was different from the alarm, different from the ship's previous reactions. This was controlled, intentional. Then the air changed. Ethan barely had time to process the sensation before his body locked up, his muscles seizing as if he had been plunged into frozen water. His breath hitched, his knees buckling, but he didn't fall. His body remained rigid, frozen mid-motion. This one studied them with something akin to curiosity, tilting its head in that unsettlingly smooth motion. But behind its gaze, behind that impossible, calculated expression, there was something worse. Recognition. "You are progressing faster than expected," the Zeltran said. Its voice was smoother than the others. Not as harsh, not as distorted. If Ethan didn't know better, he'd almost call it conversational. Impressive. Ethan forced his fingers to twitch, to break free from whatever invisible hold had locked his body in place. It was like moving through thick mud, his limbs sluggish, heavy. Beside him, the golden-veined stranger let out a low, strained breath, their own muscles trembling as they fought against the paralysis. The Zeltran's eyes flicked between them, its expression almost amused. "You feel it, don't you?" it asked, taking a slow step closer. "The connection, the way this ship speaks to you. It recognizes you now. You are not merely an intruder." His wrists tingled, a sensation so subtle he might have ignored it if not for the way his cuffs had reacted before. The neural connection. Whatever they had done to him, whatever they had placed inside his mind, it was linked to these restraints. He looked at the chair, then at his captor. A plan formed, not fully, not perfectly, but enough. He stepped forward, willing his muscles to loosen, his expression to empty. He let his breath slow, let his shoulders relax, let the tension drain from his limbs. The Zeltran watched him closely, but said nothing. Then, in a single calculated movement, Ethan collapsed. The alien reacted instantly, reaching out to steady him. In that split second, as those metallic fingers closed around his arm, he focused every thought, every ounce of willpower on the tingling sensation in his wrists. The cuffs unlocked. A rush of heat surged through his veins. The once smooth surfaces rippled, the faintly glowing veins flickering in and out of sync, as if the ship itself was trying to confuse them. The sensation sent a chill down Ethan's spine. "They're closing off paths," the stranger said, their voice tight with strain. Ethan didn't ask how they knew. He felt it too. Not in words, not in clear thoughts, but in a whisper at the edges of his mind, a suggestion more than a command. It was the same foreknowledge that had let him open the stasis pod, the same thing that had let him sense his restraints before they released. He had thought it was just an implanted awareness of his ship's systems. Now he wasn't so sure. A deep vibration rolled through the floor. The lights shifted again, their steady glow stuttering as something unseen stirred within the ship's core. Ahead, a section of the corridor began to fold in on itself, walls closing like the tightening grip of a fist. "Move!" A sharp command in an alien tongue, then a flick of the Zeltran's wrist. The man screamed. It wasn't a cry of pain. It was deeper, rawer, and unraveling. His voice broke into something fractured, something not human. His body convulsed, limbs locking at unnatural angles. Then, in an instant, he stopped. Ethan watched in horror as the man's expression smoothed into eerie calm. His movements steadied, his resistance vanishing as if it had never been there. He straightened, blinking once before stepping back in a line with the others. Ethan's stomach twisted. They weren't just controlling them. They were rewriting them. The Zeltran beside him spoke without looking at him. "You see now." His mouth was dry. "What did you do to him?" "He is integrated." That word again. Integration. Processing. Adjusting. It wasn't just a vague threat. It was real, and it was happening all around him. The hum of energy in Ethan's skull deepened, threading through his mind, stirring something just beneath the surface. He did feel it, and that terrified him. "What did you do to me?" he demanded, his voice rough but steady. The Zeltran studied him a moment longer, then exhaled, not quite a sigh, more an approximation of one. "We did nothing." It gestured lightly toward the walls, toward the living metal that pulsed around them. "The process began before we arrived. You were always meant to adapt." Ethan's breath caught. He didn't know what disturbed him more, the words themselves or the quiet certainty in the way they were spoken. The stranger beside him finally wrenched free of the paralysis, their body jerking as they staggered forward. "You're lying," they spat, their voice raw with fury. "You take people. You break them. You rewire them until they're yours." The Zeltron didn't even blink. Some, not all. Its gaze flickered back to Ethan. Some do not need to be forced. The air was different, thicker, heavier, filled with a quiet hum of energy that vibrated through his skin. The golden-veined stranger landed beside him, their breath sharp, their posture tight with the same cautious anticipation that coiled in Ethan's own chest. They had escaped, or so they had thought. Before them, the city stretched impossibly high, towers of dark stone and glowing pathways suspended in the air like veins of light. The structures weren't purely mechanical, nor entirely organic, somewhere in between, as if built from something living but bound into rigid form. The roads were smooth, glistening with a sheen that reflected the faint, violet-tinged sky above. It was not the ship, but it was not Earth either, and they were not alone. Figures moved in the distance, their silhouettes unfamiliar at first, blurred by the shifting light that played tricks on the eyes. Then, slowly, the reality of them settled into focus. People, or at least something close. The figure lifted a hand, palm open, as if offering something unseen. "Come," they said. "It is time you understood what you are." Ethan didn't move. "And if we refuse?" A pause. The figure smiled, slow and knowing. "You won't." The moment Ethan's body made contact with the throne, the world around him fractured. Not in a physical sense. The city didn't crumble, the sky didn't shatter. But in his mind, something tore open. A flood of sensations crashed over him, drowning out his thoughts. A voice, not a single voice, but many, spoke in a language he didn't recognize but somehow understood. The air thickened, pressing against his skin, not in weight but in meaning, as if the entire structure of reality had shifted around him. The city responded. The humming, the pulsing beneath his skin, it wasn't just an observation anymore. It was inside him, threading through his veins, aligning with his heartbeat. He wasn't just feeling the city. He was part of it. The images that had been flickering at the edges of his mind sharpened. A ship falling from the sky. A waiting city. A choice. His breathing quickened. His hands curled into fists against the armrests of the throne. "No, that's not possible." "You know it is." Ethan wanted to deny it, to push the thought away, but the knowledge was already there, uncoiling from the recesses of his mind like something that had only been buried, not erased. This city had been waiting for him because he had been here before. He wasn't the first. He wasn't even the first version of himself. The realization sent a sharp, ice-cold bolt of terror through him. He wrenched his focus back to the figure. "What am I?" "You are the same as you always were. You are the one who decides." The city trembled. The throne pulsed beneath his hands, and suddenly the memories came. Not just flashes, not just fragmented visions, memories. He had sat here before. Not once, not twice, but many times. A cold weight settled in Ethan's stomach. He didn't know what it meant. He didn't want to know. The ship pulsed again, this time with urgency. The Zeltron straightened, sensing something unseen. A command, perhaps. A call. It took a final step back, inclining its head ever so slightly. "We will meet again," it said, and then, just as quickly as it had arrived, it was gone, vanishing into the shadows as the paralysis fully lifted from Ethan's body. He stumbled, catching himself against the wall, his heart pounding. The golden-veined stranger turned to him, their face pale, their breathing ragged. "What the hell was that?" Ethan whispered. The stranger shook their head. "I don't know," but Ethan could feel it. The knowledge was there, buried beneath his own thoughts, waiting to be understood. And he had the sickening sense that when he finally did understand it, there would be no turning back. The moment Ethan's feet touched solid ground, the shift in atmosphere was undeniable. "Decide what?" The figure stepped closer, lowering their voice. "Whether to continue or to end it." The city stilled. The hum of energy dimmed to an eerie silence, as if the entire world was holding its breath. Ethan's pulse pounded against his skull. He could feel the weight of every version of himself pressing in from all sides. Every choice he had made, every mistake, every moment that had led him here. And the truth settled in his bones with a cold finality. He had never escaped the ship. Not truly. It had all been part of the cycle. The illusion of freedom, the illusion of choice, all leading him back to the throne. His breath came faster. His mind screamed at him to get up, to move, to fight. But then a single thought cut through the noise. What if I don't? A deep silence followed. Even the city seemed to hesitate. The golden-veined stranger's grip tightened on his arm, their voice low and urgent. Ethan, what are you doing? He swallowed hard. Humanoid forms walked the streets with a purpose Ethan couldn't yet define. Not hurried, not aimless, but something measured, controlled. Some wore clothing that resembled armor, while others were draped in flowing fabrics that shimmered as they moved. None acknowledged Ethan and the stranger. None looked surprised by their sudden arrival. A chill settled in Ethan's spine. They weren't running. They weren't reacting at all. The stranger exhaled, breaking the silence. They're waiting. Ethan's jaw tightened. For what? The stranger shook their head, but before either could take another step, a sound cut through the air, a low, resonant tone that vibrated in Ethan's chest, a frequency that wasn't heard so much as felt. The city itself reacted. The pathways glowed brighter. The towers shuddered as if exhaling, and the people stopped moving all at once. Then they turned. Hundreds of eyes locked onto them in eerie synchronization. Not hostile, not aggressive, just watching. The stranger took a step back, their fingers twitching at their side, as if reaching for a weapon they no longer had. I don't like this. Ethan didn't either. Before he could speak, the crowd parted. A figure emerged, moving toward them with deliberate ease. Unlike the others, they carried themselves with a presence that was unmistakable, something weighted, something absolute. Their clothing was layered in dark material, woven with faint traces of gold that pulsed in time with the city's energy. Their face was human, at least mostly, but too smooth, too perfect, as if refined beyond natural limitations. And their eyes, gold. Not the molten fire of the Zeltrans. Not the flickering pulse of the integrated humans. This was something else, calm, knowing, infinite. Ethan's breath slowed. Whoever this was, they were important. The figure stopped a few feet away and regarded them with quiet scrutiny before finally speaking. There was something almost gentle in their tone, something almost relieved. Ethan reached for the stranger, gripping their wrist. Come with me. They hesitated for only a moment before nodding. The city began to change. Not collapse, not crumble, change. The towers bent inward, the streets rippling as if the world itself was shedding its old form. The golden veins that had once pulsed in perfect rhythm faded, their glow dimming as something new took shape. Ethan took a step forward. The ground beneath him was solid. It had never been before. The figure watching them gave the smallest nod. This time, you are ready. Ethan didn't look back. He didn't need to. For the first time, he was walking into a future that had never existed before. And this time, the cycle did not follow. The golden-veined stranger gasped beside him, their grip tightening on his arm. I see it, they whispered. Their voice shook like something inside them had cracked open. Their golden veins burned brighter, as if the city, the throne, the very cycle itself had finally acknowledged them. Ethan turned to them, his breath uneven. You were part of this too. Their expression was pained, as if a weight had settled onto their chest, something long forgotten pressing against their ribs. I think I was, they said. Their voice was different, layered, like an echo of someone who had once spoken from within them. But I don't know what I was supposed to do. Ethan knew. He felt it. They had always been here, just like him. A constant within the cycle, but in a different way. A witness. A tether. A reflection of what he had been and what he could be. The figure who had led them here watched, patient as ever. The cycle repeats because you allow it to, they said. Something different. Then, for the first time, he didn't fight it. He let the memories come. He let the throne show him everything. And the world shattered. The world fractured. Not as an explosion or a collapse, but as something unraveling from within, like a thread pulled from the fabric of reality. Ethan felt himself stretch across time, his consciousness slipping between past and present, between the self he knew and the self that had always been. Memories surged forward, not just flashes but lived moments. He saw himself standing in the same place, making the same choice again and again. He had fought. He had fled. He had tried to destroy the throne, tried to ignore it, tried to bend it to his will. He had screamed, begged, resisted. And yet, he had always ended up right here. The throne beneath him pulsed, but now he could feel its true purpose. It was not a seat of power. It was not a prison. It was a lock. And he had been its key all along.